All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Seeds of Music. I'm your host, Kyle Williams, and this is the primo awesome web show where aspiring musicians can learn right now how to find their market and effectively grow as an independent artist or producer. And even if you don't really consider yourself a serious musician, maybe you're a hobbyist, in these interviews you're going to find a lot of great tips to help you enjoy that hobby even more. And in the cosmic sense, I guess, you can apply a lot of these concepts or life lessons to any situation you may have with any vocation to be more creative, reach your goals, and do what you love every day. Today on the show is pretty special for me. I'm bringing on my old guitar instructor from when I studied at Daytona State College in Florida, Stephen Luciano. Stephen is a fantastic jazz guitarist, and it was just really awesome, even though it was a short amount of time, just the span of a semester. It was really awesome being able to study with him, and he helped take my guitar skills just overall, not just for jazz studies, but just overall helped me take things to a next level. So we're going to be talking with him just about some key elements that it takes to have a successful music career like he has had for many, many decades, and his approaches to practicing guitar. So I'm very excited, guys. Let's get started with this interview. Okay, guys, welcome to another episode of Seeds of Music. This episode here is very, very personal for me. I actually have my old guitar instructor, Steve Luciano, on the show with us. Steve, thanks for coming by.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Kyle. Glad to do it.
Excellent. It's really great to have you on here. I mean, I know that you have like a lot of experience as not only a phenomenal jazz guitarist, but as a seasoned studio musician, you know, doing work with Disney for so many odd years. And now you do a lot of teaching you taught at Daytona State, but at college in Daytona Beach, Florida. Whereabouts do you teach now?
Well, I was teaching at Daytona State until last year, and I loved it there. It was great, but it was just, the ride was so far.
Yeah.
I was like, up and back was 3 hours in the car, so, I decided to give up that position up there. But it was under a lot of thought because I did really like it up there a lot. The people were great, and it was a good experience. But now I'm teaching at Seminole State College, which is in Sanford, Florida, Lake Mary, Sanford, Florida. And I teach also at Southeastern University, which is a small college in Lakeland, Florida. They both have pretty good music programs there, and I've got a lot of students at both places, so it keeps me busy.
Okay. So like you have a lot of these students that come to like a formal educational setting for music. I mean, tell us how you kickstarted your own music education. I mean, did you go straight into a school for it in college? Did you have it in high school? How did that work out for you?
Well, I started playing. My dad played guitar. He wasn't a professional musician, but he played, and he grew up. His time was the 40s, when he was a teenager and stuff. So he grew up in the big band era, and loved that kind of music, and loved Sinatra. Loved guitar though too, and so he played and sang. He had a good ear, and he knew a bunch of songs from that era, and he would sing and entertain people, but he wasn't a professional musician. But he loved the guitar, and I was always around the guitar. So when I was 12, I hadn't played earlier before that when I was real young, but it just didn't take. I wasn't really interested at that time. But when I was 12, I decided, I wanted to study. One of my friends was studying, and we just lucked out. Because we didn't even, I didn't know how to look for a good teacher. I was 12 years old. But,
yeah.
So we went to a guy in East Haven, Connecticut, who's still teaching. His name was Joe Tenari. And Joe was a great musician, great guitar player, and a great teacher. So as soon as I started studying with him, everything just kind of clicked. And I just, and then when I after about a year, when I was about 13, maybe close to 14, I got real serious about it and knew that I just liked jazz, from the jazz records my dad had, and then from just listening, on the radio. There was some jazz on the radio back then, and listening to jazz guitar players and horn players, piano players. I love the music of my generation, and listen to that, the Beatles, and just all the Motown stuff, Stevie Wonder, all that stuff. I love it to this day. but that's what I wanted to play was jazz. So Joe Tenari was just a great guitar. He wasn't necessarily a jazz musician, although he knew about jazz. So he showed me some stuff. And I just learned guitar from him. You know, I learned how to, you know, be a good player, what it takes to be a good player, practicing, just the whole ethic of practicing and working hard and reading music and all that stuff. He showed me some cool jazz stuff and chord melody, taught me how to do a chord melody and improvise. And then I studied classical with him for a while. But when I got to be about 16, 17 years old, I studied in New York with Sal Salvador, who was a pretty nationally known, internationally known jazz guitarist of that time. And I learned a lot of jazz stuff from him, jazz harmony and just different concepts and things like that. So that was, and I went to college for a while. Like I went to Bridgeport University, and Sal was there at the time and studied there. But this was the early 70s when it was so easy to get a gig. You know, there was live music.
Yeah.
So I was playing so much, you know, between like guitar duo stuff, doing jazz, and then playing in top 40 bands and things like that. So, you know, from like around 73, 74, I just was in a good top 40 band and did that for a while, you know, and so, you know, got away from jazz. I was just playing top 40 music pretty much, but you know, it was fun. It was, you know, there was clubs everywhere, and it was at that time period. So, but that's how I learned to play rock and roll, because growing up playing jazz, it's a different animal playing rock and roll on a guitar. You know, you might know all the theory about it, and I knew how to solo, but to be able to bend a string and just play differently, and that was a whole experience that I was able to really hone that skill by playing 5-6 nights a week. So when I first started out, I knew I didn't sound very good. You know, luckily, my cousin played bass, and he was a good rock and roll guitar player.
Were you playing that arch style?
Yeah, we'd switch off. So I can't solo on this tune, you know, whatever it was, you know. So I'd play bass, and he would. But then little by little, I started to catch it, you know, and it got easier, you know. And so, but it was through that I became a little more versatile, you know, because when you're a professional musician, you know, and you just play jazz, it's great. I mean, if you're, you know, in New York and you get into those circles, and you know, that would be a great thing. That never happened for me. But I was able to make a living as a musician playing jazz, but other styles too, playing blues and rock, and doing all kinds of things.
Okay. So would you say like the key to be able to make a living as a professional musician, besides from being like, you know, good as hell, is to diversify with your playing styles?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, there's less. If you're going to be a professional musician, it means you're going to play your instrument for a living, and it's harder today to do that than it was in my day. Yeah. Because there's less live music. Now, there's still opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, there's still opportunity. But it seems to me, and you know, this could just be from my perception, so I don't have any hard, concrete facts to back this up. But there's more good players today than there's ever been. You know, there's just more people playing. And if you're a good player, if you're a good student, it's easier to learn today. You can learn quicker because of technology. Because you can go to your favorite players on YouTube. You can get their lit. You could slow it down to a crawl and learn. I don't know how to can't tell you how many records I ruined trying to learn licks. You know, trying to transcribe, dropping it. And then later on, it was cassette tapes, but then they would stretch and all that stuff. That made it a little easier, but you couldn't really slow it down. And then, like in the early '80s, Marantz came out with something that you can do at like half speed. That was kind of a revelation. But now, I mean, you could do, you know, you could any kind of fast. It doesn't matter how fast it is. You can get it. You can transcribe it. You know, and that's a great way to learn, by transcribing. So you can learn faster. It's just as hard. I mean, you still got to work as hard, but you can learn quicker today than you could back then. And everybody's going to school, and there's great music on college campuses all over the country. So there's more competition. To be a musician, to play live, you got to have a lot of skills. So I tell my students, you know, learn to be versatile. I teach jazz harmony and jazz theory, but I don't say they have to play like a jazz guy. Yeah. As long as they make the changes on a song, they could sound like a rock guy. As long as they can hear the changes and make the changes, no matter what kind of music they play, they're going to be a better soloist. You know, so that's kind of what I preach to them. But they have to be versatile. man, in this day and age, if you can play, different styles, obviously, but then if you sing, if I was young and I didn't sing well when I was young, I can carry a tune, I could sing harmonies, but I didn't sing. I would definitely take vocal lessons today. You play good guitar and sing. I would learn like what you're doing, like recording techniques, and learn about all that stuff. Learn how to use Pro Tools or Digital Performer or whatever else is out there.
I've got to write all this down. This is such good stuff. That's why I keep looking down. Sorry.
But go to school, learn how to arrange. Learn how to arrange voices. A choral thing, and learn how to arrange horns, and learn how to do all that stuff. Because, I have a friend that's a great arranger who's also a great saxophone player. But when he's not working as a saxophone player, he gets gigs, just writing arrangements for people. So. He has a great skill in that, so it could keep, it keeps the income coming,
Yeah.
So I would do all those things if I was, a 21-year-old guy right now trying to make it as a musician. Because, like I say, there was so many live gigs back. I played my first gig in 1969, and I was 14 years old or whatever, and I didn't work I didn't work like 5 nights a week or anything, but as a teenager, 15, 16, 17 years old, in high school, I probably did, 4, 5, 6 gigs a month, even back then. And I wasn't really even pursuing that, just had friends, and somebody was getting married, or knew somebody who had a restaurant, and we played the ball, all that kind of stuff. Those days are over now, and so you have to look for, different avenues to play,
Okay.
And that's that's kind of the way it is in my perception of how.
No, I agree. I think your perception is like very much spot on, because the game has like changed a lot. I mean, not only technology has changed the landscape. It's not only just the internet alone. If you know how to pick through it, you can have access to great information. If you know how to use it, you can learn really fast, because you don't have to guess. Like, okay, how what are the modes on the guitar? What the hell is that? You just punch it in.
Buy a book, just punch it in. There it is.
Yeah, and even then, you can have a YouTube video of a guy demonstrating modal playing, and have examples. So that's changed it. And on top of that, all the recording technology nowadays is much more affordable, so you can practice arranging so much with real instruments that sound real, because it's all digital.
You don't have to wait for a band to play your arrangement.
Yeah.
To find out if it's any good or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just MIDI it, and put it on there, and it's done. Yeah. So what? That pretty much covered like one of the other questions I was going to ask you, which was, what key elements you think you would need to have a successful musician career now that we know those, getting vocal lessons, knowing knowing changes, learning recording technology, learn arrangement, learn by transcribing, take advantage of all of the online resources that we have to learn. I want to ask you specifically about guitar and guitar practice. What is your approach to guitar practice? Maybe when you were first starting out, maybe not now.
I mean, even now to a certain extent. But what I tell students starting out is you have to have different disciplines within your practice. You have to spend time practicing technique.
Okay.
And once you learn like whatever scales you're playing for technique, or whatever you're doing, like some kind of a pattern, that you're doing, you should do several things, but you make it, once you learn that, that's like mindless practice. You could sit in front of the TV and do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because so many people, I got to sit in a room by myself, and it becomes, because it's a chore to practice technique. I mean, that's a chore for most people.
Yeah.
Myself included. So I would sit in front of the TV and just play skits. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Commercial comes on and play louder. You know what I mean? Not all the time, but sometimes you don't have to think about that. That's just, you want to get it where you don't think about it, where it's muscle memory.
Okay.
But sometimes with technique, you do have to concentrate if you're doing a new thing, because it's like working out. You could do the same exercises in the same pattern, and eventually you're too used to it.
I can lift a weight like this while we're doing this interview.
Right,
if I've done it enough. Not right now. I'm a little flabby, but
Yeah, me too. But you know, when you start playing, you know, you got to switch things up. So sometimes you do have to focus and just have quiet and work on things. And so technique is very important. Play fast and clean, but also slow practice. Practice something really slow, and really make sure you're articulating everything right.
Okay.
So that's part of what you should do when you practice guitar. The other part would be, you know, like one of the things as far as being versatile, and what I preach to most students is to learn to read music on the guitar. Reading music on the guitar is hard. There's like the joke, how do you get a guitar player to turn down? Give him some music to read. Because, you know, and all instruments are hard. They're all hard. But some instruments are easier to learn to read on. For example, piano, although you're reading two clefs, but once you have that down, you know, if you have a C note on the third space of the staff, that's in one spot on the piano.
Yeah, but
it's in one spot on a saxophone.
Yeah.
You know, it's not in one spot on the guitar. You know what I mean? So, you know, and from that one spot, you can reach the other notes. You know what I mean? But you can't on the guitar. So if you only know it in one spot and the next note's up on the 12th fret, then you're dead. You know, you can't. So you need to know that C note up in that position, you know, where it is. So things like that, it makes it tougher to learn to read. But if you practice it every day, you can get serviceable, you know. Great readers on the guitar mostly are guys who do it all the time. They're studio guys, you know. But you can become a competent reader just by working on it and putting yourself in positions where you need to read. So that is something, you know, as far as practicing. So that thing. And then, so reading and because that's a separate discipline.
Okay.
Technique, and then the rest of it should be, you know, practicing whatever your sound, you know, your groove, you know, practicing playing whether it's a reggae tune, whether it's a straight up jazz thing, whether it's a metal, whatever it is. When you're not soloing, you need to groove. You know, I mean, you need to learn how to play with a bass player and a drummer, whatever the discipline of music is.
Yeah.
You know, it's not all about, I can have just as much fun grooving on two chords with a bass player and a drummer than I can taking a solo. You know, that's true, you know. So you have to think about those things, you know, learn voicings on the guitar and, you know, have a good chord knowledge and really understand how to groove in the style of music that you want to play. And then, of course, then there is soloing, you know, and how to approach that. So and practicing soloing, like you can know a scale at 1,000 miles an hour, but you might not be able to solo out of that scale.
Yeah, that's not musical, though, just going up and down the scale.
It's a whole different mindset. Yeah. So now you have to learn, here's the fifth, here's the seventh, here's this, and you know where they are, and just different combinations of notes, how to backtrack, you know, play chromatics within that scale.
Yeah.
You know, and all those kind of things that you listen, you transcribe, and you learn from other people, obviously, but you practice. You hear the changes in your head, and you practice solo. You know, you record the changes and you play against them, or you play with Aebersol, or you know, or any other kind of band in the box, anything like that. You know, jam with somebody. You know, practicing soloing is very, very important to become a good soloist.
All right, yeah, that's. My notepad is filled up. It's filled up with it. Yeah, it's like I'm just getting a lot of motivation just you know, listening to all of this, even though it may be things that you know, that I've read or heard somewhere else. It still helps to have it like reiterated because it is the truth. You have to.
Absolutely.
I mean, even ear training. Like I have like a separate ear training separate for me. Like sometimes I use a program that plays like a chord and I'm supposed to tell the chord quality, or it plays an interval and I'm supposed to say, okay, you know, that's like a perfect fifth or a perfect fourth. Right. Or I'll sing into, one cool thing I've done is I'll sing into a mic over top of a backing track and then I'll go back and transcribe whatever I sing. And I'll try to find those notes. And I'll find out that what I end up singing, even if it's really simple, ends up being more musical and more pleasant than if I thought cerebrally, you know, this is the scale I'm on and whatnot. So, that's really valuable. I see what you're saying, just to kind of look at yourself as like you're a musician. These are your separate areas, you know, disciplines that you have to practice. You did mention one thing that I want to ask you specifically about that I think that I think is really important is articulation. Because I know a lot of guitarists out there, they learn their scales, but they're playing everything at the same volume with the same feel, or or all legato, or maybe all staccato. But it's not really varied. So, what kind of exercises do you use to work on your articulation?
Well, I will do different picking techniques. So I'll play scales with just alternate picking.
Okay.
Down, up, down, up, down. No two downs or two ups in a row. And then I'll use what's now called economy picking.
Okay.
Where if you're ascending, then moving like physically toward the floor with your hand.
Yeah.
Every time you change a string, you use a downstroke.
Yeah.
Come back every time you change a string, use an upstroke.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have to say for me, because I'm more old school, and that wasn't really taught. It wasn't even called economy picking back then. It was called speed picking or cross picking.
Yeah.
And so I use economy picking when I'm ascending. And then I just kind of worked on my own little technique coming back, descending, where I use alternate picking, but I kind of hold my right hand a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Play, coming back for speed. But, whatever. I know great players that play just with alternate picking.
Okay.
And then there's guys who do a lot of slurring and hammer-ons and stuff like that. And, but they're musicians. They're musical, and they've made what they do work.
Mm-hmm.
As far as guitar players, you could look at one of my favorite guitar players, John Scofield, who doesn't necessarily, when you hear him, you're not necessarily going to say, wow, what great technique he has.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He doesn't have a lot of, and maybe he does, but he holds it in reserve a lot. So he plays in a different kind of way, but he still makes great music. And then you can listen to somebody like, this guy I just got turned on to, Kurt Rosenwinkel. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's an amazing guitar player. Plays jazz a lot of time. He can play traditional jazz, but he'll play over changes and over a swing groove, but he'll sound like a metal guy. So you got to check him out. But anyway, his technique is flawless. Mike Stern's technique is flawless. Guys like that. So they have tons of technique, and they're great players too. So, it's as long as you don't have to have great technique to make great music.
Yeah.
But if that's what you want, then you need to work on it.
Yeah.
You have to work. Everyone has to work to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But if you want to go beyond that, if that's what you want, you need to work on it, because everybody's got to go after what their voice is.
Yeah. And your voice might not call for economy picking. Maybe you're just going to do really rhythmic downstroking.
Yeah. Articulation is also like what you said. Really, it also comes under that blanket of don't play all eighth notes. Take a breath. It was always taught to me that if you're improvising as a guitar player, you can play constantly, But if you're a horn player, unless you do circular breathing, and they don't do that all the time, you gotta take a breath, So think like that when you play. When I play guitar lines, I try to think like that. You create space too, So that's something that comes under that heading of articulation in that way, And play rhythmic notes. Don't always, I tell my students all the time, okay, we're going to practice playing out of these scale shapes, these chord shapes, arpeggios, and know where all the notes are. But just because you know where all the notes are, you don't have to play all the notes.
Yeah.
You can make something happen rhythmically on one string, two strings, So that's all, thinking about those things is all part of that for me, part of articulation.
Okay. So like the phrasing, holding things in reserve, keeping things simple, like not playing everything all at once, because then it's what you're trying to say.
Right, or trying to I know, here's some notes, I got all these notes, I got to play them all, I understand that, and that's something that people will do when they're first starting out. And the other thing I tell students, and I've always tried to play this way, I've never really thought about it until recently, is like, and it's not something you could teach, but it's something you got to be aware of, and you have to play with emotion. You learn something and really have it, but you don't have any connection with it. And for a guitar player, that's the emotion that you play with comes out of your hands. So it's got to flow from your heart, from your brain, wherever, into your hands. That's how you make whatever you're feeling inside of you come out on the guitar is going to come out through your hands.
Yeah.
So just being aware of that is I think will improve people's articulation, because they realize how important it is to have mastery as much as you can over both of your hands. You know. So, you know, just, you know, sometimes thinking in those ways.
Yeah.
There's really nothing you could say. You know, I could say, so you got to play more emotional, but that doesn't mean anything, you know.
Yeah.
I remember, you know, I mean, all the time when you play, you know, anytime you play as a musician, I mean, I play jazz, so wanting to be a good jazz musician, taking good solos, I remember, like, you know, sometimes you just hate what you do, you know, you don't like it, you know, you're sick of it or whatever. You want to play a good solo, and it's like, you know, you got to get more. I remember being young and not feeling like, how am I going to get emotion into my playing? And I remember, you know, like reading something by Barney Kessel, and he was talking about reading poetry and all that. And I started reading poetry. I had no connection to it whatsoever. But it's really just your life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Eventually you do enough things in your life, and you have enough good experiences, bad experiences, all those things, you use it, you know, and those things will come out into your playing. You know, and so that's because, you know, if you want to be an artist in what you do musically, you have to express what's inside you, you know. So that's more than just, I know all these scales. I can kill the diminished scale, the whole tone scale.
Yeah.
You want to be able to do that, but that has nothing to do with playing with. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, yeah. You actually reminded me of an experience that I've felt I had in the past year where I was spending so much time in my room working on stuff and not experiencing like enough of life in general. And I was talking with a friend of mine, and he said, you know, it's when you're making your music, all of your life experiences and the emotions that you've had are going into making your music what it is. So you need to get out there and have those experiences so that your music will be, you know, full and will be robust with that. So I think it's important to note that, because it's very easy just to get shut up in your room and, you know, working on the technique or jamming with yourself. You got to get out there. You got to get out on the streets.
That's so important. It is, to play with other people, whether you're getting paid or not. You know, it's just playing with other people. When you do that and you feel like you did well, that's a great feeling.
Yeah.
It makes you the next day get up and do it some more and practice and work on it, you know. And you'll have times when you feel you did great, you know, and then you'll have times where you were disappointed in what you did.
Yeah.
That also is fuel to, you know, to work and get better. But it's much better when you like what you did. And you feel definitely.
Yeah, because you have to, I guess you have to have this like self-critical element, you know, where you like you're working to standards that are very high, and you're trying to, you know, please yourself and not worry too much about. Because, you know, you go to jams and the guys come up and they say, oh, you're a great player or whatever, and you don't know if they really liked your playing or not, you know. So you really just got to have that inner critical self. You know, how was that for you? I mean, did you hold yourself to, like, such high standards that sometimes you would just get really stressed out, and how would you deal with that?
Well, that's a good question. I tell students and myself too, is you have to be honest with yourself. You know, and we live in a society like our pop culture society. It's like, you know, everybody gets a trophy kind of thing, where, you know, we have people on American Idol that don't know they can't sing. You know, because I see people like that all the time that don't know they're not good at something, and and I'm not saying you shouldn't try and all that stuff, but man, you can either sing or you can't. You can either play or you can't.
You know, or they haven't spent enough time developing it.
Right. So for yourself, you have to be a critic of yourself. Now, there's a fine line. You don't want to get down on yourself and feel like you're not worth anything, but you have to be self-critical. That's how you get better. Otherwise, you're going to be like that American Idol guy, thinking you're making it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's guitar players like I've seen. They think they're making it. They have no idea. You know what I mean? They just. So I don't know what they think. How music affects them.
They're playing too loud. They hear themselves.
You know what I mean? But how it's affecting them is certainly different than how music affects me. You know, but so if you are aware of that, it's important. Yeah, be a little self-critical. You know, but also praise yourself. You know, be happy when you do accomplish things. You know,
Yeah.
And also know that, be self-critical, but know that you have time. Like you work on this tomorrow, work on it the next day. Hey, if it was easy, anybody could do it.
Yeah.
It's not easy to become good
Yeah.
at any instrument. It's not easy.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work. So.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of work, a lot of work.
Yeah.
And you've definitely put in the time for that. Like, I've heard you play, and it's,
Well, I appreciate
definitely
it.
enjoyed it, man. Definitely enjoyed it.
I've been doing it a long time. That's the other thing too. Like that, is the Malcolm Gladwell thing, the 10,000 hours. If
Yeah.
you do, that's true though, because I've seen. So as a musician, and I tell students, if you start out with talent, you don't have to be a prodigy by any sort of, just an average amount of talent, and you work hard, and you come to me as a beginner. And that's just not me. That's any good guitar teacher
Yeah.
or any good teacher of anything.
Yeah.
If you come to me in 3.5 to 4 years, if you practice hard, you'll be an expert. You'll be an expert guitar player. Now, does that mean you've learned everything? No, you're going to spend a lifetime getting better, but you'll be able to do anything. That you'll be able to read music. You'll be able to improvise. You'll be able to groove on a song. Play good chords and play different styles.
Yeah.
You're an expert.
Yeah.
At that, and that's not that long. If you're 15 years old, to spend 4 years on something, by the time you're 19, you're going to be playing. Now you go to school, you go to college, you learn more, you get a degree, you're going to learn other things. You learn guitar still, but now you're going to learn how to arrange, you're going to learn how to do, learn ear training, you're going to learn all those other things that are important in music, But that's really, I've seen people, 'cause I've been at it a long time. So I've seen people maybe that I saw play in the 80s, let's say, some mid 80s, and I thought, to myself, they're not very good, And then I've heard them, 20 years later, because they never gave up, and they play great, they sound great.
Mm-hmm.
So if you stay with it and try to get better, you will get better. You will. You just have to.
So, Stephen, what do you think would be like the biggest, most common mistake that guitarists make when they're trying to learn?
Ooh.
Besides playing too loud at the jam.
Yeah, that's a whole nother issue about, playing loud and stuff.
Yeah.
But, what comes to mind first is thinking, not mastering something before you go out and try to play something.
Oh, okay.
So, like if you have a concept that you're working on and you think you have it in your practice room, that's just the start of having it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you got to make sure you have it in the practice room. Put yourself in a position. Now you got to go out and play live. You have to perform this thing. So I think the biggest mistake people make is not being ready for a performance, I would say.
Okay.
So, you think you have it, and then you get out, and you don't factor in that you're going to be a little nervous.
Yeah.
What I mean? And then if you make a mistake and you really know something, you're going to be fine. You can just get right back on.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because you're not going to play it perfect. If you're playing a piece or even just a concept.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to keep going and play through a mistake.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of practice that. I tell my students too, like if they're working on something to perform, as long as it doesn't matter who it is, as long as it's a human being sitting there listening to it, it could be your 5-year-old sister. You're going to play different than when you're just sitting in your practice room.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let people hear you. You're working on something. Hey, whoever it is, it could be your roommate, it could be your mother, it could be your wife, whoever. Listen to me play this.
Okay.
They don't have to tell you what they think, because you're going to know if it was good or not. So, just things like that. Be prepared. The biggest mistake my students make, and they don't all make this mistake, but it's the most common mistake, is they're not prepared for a recital performance or a jury as much as they think they are. They learn how much more it takes to be prepared for something.
So what habit could they develop that would help them to be more prepared? Would they make it a habit of, after every practice session, calling someone in and saying, hey, here's this? Or what would you suggest?
Not after every practice session.
Okay.
You could do that in your mind. You
Okay.
know, you could kind of put yourself in whatever situation you're going to do, whether it's going to be playing in a club, people are coming to see you, or whether it's going to be in a college situation, you know, some kind of performance. You can, in your mind, you could put yourself in that situation, you know, and but you know, every once in a while, you need to bring someone in to listen to you.
Yeah.
You know, so that's you know something that that I think is critical to do that.
Yeah.
You know, do that. You know, playing something too fast. That's another mistake people do.
Okay.
Although,
Okay.
you know, and so always, if you're gonna perform, or let's say you worked out someone's solo and you're gonna play it on the gig tonight. You know what I
Okay.
mean? When you count that thing off, you have to hum in your head the hardest line of that solo. You know what I mean? To know what tempo you can play that at.
Yeah.
We've all made that mistake. You know, I've made, oh man, I counted this off too fast. You know what I mean? So that's, you know, that's a mistake that, you know, all musicians make from time to time.
1, 2, 3, 4. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. You're excited. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So hum the hardest line in your head and get the tempo in your head before you count a tune off. You know?
That's a great piece of advice.
Yeah.
Let me write that down. Hum the hardest part, because you know
Yeah.
once you hit that hardest part, you're either
Right.
screwed or you're prepared.
Yep.
So I want to ask you like a little bit about like you were out in Los Angeles for a time, like weren't you?
No, I never lived in LA.
You never lived in it, but you've done work out here. What was that like?
No, I did. I've gone. The only thing I never worked in LA. I've just gone to the NAMM show. You know, a few
Okay.
times. And, you know, I have friends out there, but no. I mean, you know, I've worked. You know, traveling on the road, and you know, in the
Okay.
Northeast, New York City, a little bit in Chicago. You know, but basically the Eastern Seaboard.
Okay, so you've been on the you've been on the
Yeah,
East
and then
Coast.
in other countries too.
Okay.
You know, but I've never you know been out in LA to work.
Okay. So after all that traveling that you've done in touring, when did you when did you decide to start teaching guitar? Were you teaching to kind of like help pay the bills at the time, or?
You know, I didn't do much teaching in my younger days. I mean, every once in a while I have some students. When I was young, I taught in a music store up in Connecticut. You know, that's where I'm from. So I taught in a music store. When I first moved to Florida, I didn't know a lot of people. I didn't know anybody really in the music business. So little by little, I started to get to know people and work gigs. So the first thing I ever did as a musician was I taught in a music store here. I taught for a couple of years in music stores and then did gigs in Florida. You know? But then after that, I started working at Disney. I started subbing at Disney. And back in the early 80s, there was a lot of work at Disney. So even when you subbed, you worked enough.
Yeah.
So I kind of cut back on my teaching. I might have taught one day a week.
Yeah.
And work doing gigs and working at Disney. Then when I went full time, I really didn't teach at all. Every once in a while, somebody would come by, hey, give me a lesson or something like that. So it was a lot of years where I didn't teach, you know.
Okay.
And I taught on and off in Connecticut. I didn't really teach full time in Connecticut either. Just on and off time, like on a Saturday or something like that. So in 2001, the thing that I did for like 18 years at Disney was no more. So everybody got laid off.
Okay.
So I still worked at Disney as a musician on a casual basis. You know,
Okay.
they hire me for this or that, but not a full-time, everyday thing.
Okay.
So I decided, you know what, I'm just going to start teaching. So I
Okay.
started students in this area where I live. And so for the first, maybe up until around 2005, from 2001 to about 2005, 6, I was teaching, you know, 25 to 30 students a week,
Okay.
either at a studio that we had nearby or out of my house, and I was still doing gigs. Then, and then around 2007, I got a call from an instructor on a college level, and he said, you know, we need you to come out here, and you know, and I didn't know how long it was going to last. I think they hired me on a temporary basis, but it kind of worked out. They liked what I was doing, and I, you know, I enjoyed it. So from there, it kind of snowballed to a few colleges, you know. So since 2007, it's probably about 60% of my income now is teaching,
Okay.
and then the rest is playing gigs.
Okay.
You know, I don't work as many gigs as I did years ago, but I don't really have a desire to do that now. You get older and it's like, I love I still practice, work on stuff, and I still do gigs and I enjoy doing it, but I don't really want to work all that much because I tell you, it's tiring, man. It's like, you work, you're teaching, and then you got to, I'll drive out to this wedding or something, and I got to change my clothes and, that, and, play for a couple, 3 hours and get back. It's like, I like doing it, but at certain gigs I don't have to take anymore. If it's a gig that's just, you would just do it for the money, like you're not going to enjoy it at that much playing, then I could say no now, which is a great kind of thing. I don't mean awesome. Like I'm above it, but hey, you're going to like some gigs and you're not going to enjoy other gigs, So they're all gigs are good. I mean, if you're playing your guitar for money, that's a good thing, no matter what you're playing.
Yeah.
But, you're going to enjoy some gigs more than others, no question.
Yeah. Well, you've worked at it enough, and your career is, like, grown to a point where, like, you should be able to pick and choose, like, what gigs you're going to play, based off of, your enjoyment, if you don't have to worry about money. So for, I know there's, like, people out there, musicians out there that want to take their, skills to the next level, and they might not have, they might not be interested in going back to college necessarily, might not have the funding to do it because college now, as compared to 70s, is like crazy expensive. But comparatively, getting one-on-one lessons is not that expensive, as opposed to college tuition. So if someone was shopping around, for a music teacher, a guitar teacher, what do you think are like the key qualities? Maybe like 3 or 4 like key qualities of a great guitar teacher.
Well, I think they probably need to be versatile. So many guitar teachers today, you go to a music store and they got somebody teaching guitar, and again, there's exceptions to everything, but you got some kid back there who's maybe 19, plays in a rock band or something, doesn't read music, and just teaches songs. You know what I mean? They don't really know how to teach the instrument from the bottom up, from the fundamentals of the instrument.
Okay. And
so my philosophy has always been, we can work on songs, and that's great, but mostly I'm going to teach you to play guitar so you can just play these songs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but so many kids, they'll go, I just learned this, and they end up playing 20 songs badly. You know what I'm saying? They can never really play the songs.
Mm-hmm.
So, you want to make sure that, if you're looking for a teacher, that they have where they have versatility and they're going to teach you how to read music, because it's not only, reading out of a book, it shouldn't be everything, but it should be part of a lesson, especially for beginners, because it's, going out of a method book, you learn how to read music basically. You learn how to figure something out. You're not going to be a sight reader just because you went through a couple of Bay books or even the Berkeley books, Yeah. It's not going to make you, but you'll be able to figure stuff out.
Yeah.
You look at a piece of music and then you'll know how to work on it.
Yeah.
But what books like that do, like the Berkeley book, even the Mel Bay stuff, or some of the other things, is they give you techniques that are all concentrated in one spot, that book. So you're going to pick better. You're going to have better control over your right hand. You're going to be able to do things with your left hand when you're done with that book that you couldn't do before.
Yeah.
So, that should be something that, especially with beginners, that a teacher works on. It doesn't have to be the whole lesson, but it should be part of the lesson.
I got my copy of the...
Yeah. and then somebody who's going to teach you about harmony, and whether it's whatever kind of music you want to learn, you shouldn't just play power chords. You know what I mean? You should learn how to play power chords, but you shouldn't just play power chords.
Yeah.
So you need to learn about harmony, and then take it from there. And there's tons of guys now that teach really well, that play good, but also know how to teach. So you just gotta, you want to look for somebody like that, and somebody that can inspire you too.
Yes. So having the quality of being able to teach from the ground up, versatility, be inspirational, be a good player themselves. But also make it fun. I'm also Because it is in the end, music is fun, but you have to learn the basics. You have to be able to put up with some amount of of drudgery at times when you're working on the technique.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly.
And if you want to be a good player, it's just there's no way around it.
Right.
Well, that
It's like, yeah, you hear, like, you're in LA. You hear it all the time. Everybody's got a script or whatever. But an actor who makes it will always say, "Well, I sacrificed. I did this, this, and this." And that's what you have to do as a musician too. But it's not just sacrifice in a sense like I had to work and this job, or I had to do this, or I went without, 3 meals a day, which is all part of it. It's also working at your craft.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When other people are going out and partying. You know what I mean? So if you're an actor, you might be learning, 3 pages of dialogue, and you're home doing that because you have an audition while everyone else is going out and partying. It's the same with if you want to be a musician. You're going to work on something you can't play until you can play it. Or you're just going to, stay at home because you want to play this, or you're going to work on something technique-wise to get better. Those are the kind of sacrifices too that you want to make. For art.
Absolutely, and especially with like music, you're not going to be in the beginning, or for quite some time, even past the beginning, you're not going to be making a ton of money, so you're not going to be able to be going out or eating out or like drinking beers all the time. And
that's right. Yeah,
so
that's right. Yeah, it's but hey, somebody said just recently, and it's true. Like, if you're going to pick music as a career, it better be like, if you don't do it, you're going to be miserable. You're going to have a miserable life because that's all you want to do. You know what I mean? Because music's a hard career. Any of the arts is a hard career. So it has to be something that you don't want to do anything else. You're going to be miserable doing it. The few times that I've done other gigs, besides music, and some of them I enjoy. I enjoy doing some of the, like jobs that I had when I was young. But I never had anything more than a year because I missed playing music too much. You know what I mean? And it was like, I got to get back to it now. And or somebody's calling, they're starting up, the band's starting back up again or whatever. You know what I mean? It was just kind of those things.
Yeah.
And so even though some of those jobs were good jobs and I might have been a career, I wasn't interested. I knew that I would be miserable if I stayed in that. For me, I had to play.
So if you say you got a guitarist or just anyone, not necessarily a guitarist, but just a musician, instrumentalist, who's done enough work to where they're kind of getting to the level where they can start like jamming, they can start hanging with tougher musicians. Like, when is the point that you should start getting out there and trying to like move your career along and trying to get those gigs and going to those auditions? Like, how do you know when it's time?
That's a hard question. Everybody's different. For some people, it's better to get with people and start a band, and then try to get gigs as a band. Because if you want to get gigs as a single guitar player, who maybe that's your only skill is playing guitar.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You need to be good, but maybe you sing good and you play decent guitar. If you sing good and play great guitar, man, you're set. I mean, people are going to be calling you.
That's what I'm shooting. I'm shooting for singing, and right now I'm decent at guitar, but and vocals.
But if you just play guitar, it's hard to go to people you don't know and audition for something. I'm not saying you can't get it, but you need to play good. You need to be good. You need to bring something to that. So maybe you have a certain look and you move around and you have energy. All those things. I hate to say it because that's kind of what I don't do, but it's important. You know what I mean?
That's why you do the splits. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Actually, I have a story about that. But that's you got to know what you're auditioning for. There's all kind, but that my advice is someone young, especially being out in LA, because if you're going to audition from a guitar player, then you got to know that there's probably the greatest guitar players that are out of work, let alone working, are in LA. You know what I mean? There's tons of guys that that play just amazing. You know, think of all the schools that are out there. The guy, you know, the Guitar Institute or Musicians Institute, and you know, USC, and I mean, there's just so many great players all over the place. You know, so you got to compete with those people. You know, so no, and that doesn't mean there's no such thing as the greatest player in the world, because everybody has something different to give. There's great players. There's tons of them. So if you get into that category where you play, everybody says, man, you play great. You know, you really sound good. Well, then, you know, you start with that. Then it's about networking. It's just like any other business, getting to know people, getting out there, going to jam sessions. You know, if you wanted to make it as a single guitar player and just be hired as a guitarist, you got to go to jam sessions. People have to know who you are. You know, and then you got to make friends. And like I say, my advice would be to get some, you know, a duo, trio, anything, you know, any kind of band that you can go out as a band and get work and get more known then. Even then, you know, you'd be even more known. You know, you know. So but it's, you know, it's not easy. It's because, like I say, there's less live gigs.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. But I think there is definitely. I mean, I'm still getting knowledgeable about LA's specific live scene thing going on, but there's still other cities that have like their own burgeoning live scenes. Like heard Austin's has like a good live scene. You know?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, we just used LA because that's where you're living, but I mean, when I first moved to Florida, there was several jam sessions, and I used to go to all of them. You know, and I got to know a lot of people that way. You know, people got to hear me, and you know, and I got some gigs out of it, and you know, and so, you know, that's an invaluable resource, you know, to be able to do that. But you know, it's all just, you know, trying to be versatile, just, you know, being versatile, able to play different styles. You know, that's my advice to any players is, you know, open. And most people do. If you're serious about music, you're not just listening to one genre of music.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to open up to, because everything is so much. You know, years ago there was punk music, you know, and punk music was what it was. Now you hear that punk influence in pop music.
Yeah.
You hear reggae in pop music. You know, of course, you know, hip hop, and there's, you know, so there was these pure forms of this music, but now there's so much of crossover.
Yeah.
You hear jazz and hip hop.
Yeah.
You know, so and the only music that you can hear on the radio, like, you know, pop radio, that has guitar solos in it is country. The solo, you know, the recorded guitar solo was gone. You know, it's, you know, you don't even hear it in rock and roll anymore. You know, it's some guy with a bunch of, not that they're not good players, they might be. Somebody's telling them to hold back, right? So producer, so they got a lot of delay on it, and they're playing two strings, you know, whatever. But in country music, man, you're hearing killer guitar solos, man. They're all over the place, you know, which is kind of cool. You know, you know, years ago we waited for, you know, the next guitar solo from Clapton or from whatever other band there was that was on the radio all the time.
Yeah.
But the solo has been transplanted that's the rap section now.
Yeah.
You know, where the solo used to be. And that's what it is, you know. So that's another reason why people, you know, like the general public, they don't become instrumentalist fans. They don't become fans of instrumentalists. They were up until probably the 90s, you know. You know, because metal was big in the 80s, and people were fans of instrumentalists, you know. But you know, even regular, you know, not the hardcore fans, because they're always there, but just everyday people knew who Steve Vai was. You know what I mean? Or, you know, and some of these other guys, you know, of the 80s, you know. Now, you know, it's not like that, because there's no instrumental. You don't hear anything on the radio. You say, man, that was nice solo, or that was nice playing, you know. At least I know there are college stuff and on the internet, which is the same here. The internet's everything now. It's everything. Because you don't need to be selling 10 million records. You can have a great career, make a great living by being internet savvy. You know, like you are right now. I mean, just your music gets out there. Sometimes you just give it away. That's all right. You know, people give away their music, but it creates a fan base, and then you go out and do live shows. You know, I mean, or you know, you could sell, you know, one single, you know, and you can get on YouTube, and maybe if you have a good channel, there's how many people listen to YouTube? I mean,
A
watch
lot.
a couple billion maybe. So if you get a tiny, tiny percentage of that, into your music,
Yeah.
That's a great thing. That's just happened in the last maybe 10 years, right?
Yeah,
So, that's an awesome thing. That's another thing as a musician, you should definitely be into that,
Definitely be
what the internet has to offer.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it's no different, I guess, than, being like a musician, in the 60s or 70s and knowing, how do you connect with other, like knowing newspaper or like what was the media back then, being able to tap into that,
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I don't think I remember. But, I mean, it was, what it was? It was one-on-one. You'd go out to clubs, like I would go hear musicians. And I remember, because my dad was such a big fan, even before I drove a car, we would go out and we would hear jazz.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard some, because we were right near New York, so I heard Clark Terry bunches of times. I mean, I heard some great big bands out of New York. I heard, Zoot Sims and Al Cohn.
Yeah.
Those are legend guys. And then I heard tons of guitar players. And I used to follow, I don't know if you've ever heard of Bucky Pizzarelli. His son, John Pizzarelli.
Okay, I never heard John
has a
Pizzarelli.
great career of singing and playing guitar. He's really good. And he's got a great career going. But Bucky, now is like in his 80s. Bucky was a New York studio guy and a great guitar player, played 7-string, and he was a real nice guy. He is. I mean, he's a real nice guy. And I remember as a kid going to see him, and I would talk to him, and he would show me stuff. He'd say, "Oh, you do it this way," and he'd pick up the guitar, and he'd say, "You need to practice this, and you need to practice this." And I'd be like, wide-eyed, looking at this guy. But some of the things he said to me, I had enough experience back then to know, okay, yeah, I'm going to go home and practice that. You know what I mean? Other things went over my head, but a lot of it didn't. But just watching those guys, watching live music, was another big part of, watching other people play.
Yeah.
Not just listening, via, whatever medium, but watching people play is really good. And so back then, that was probably the biggest thing, the one-on-one thing. Of course, there were still magazines back then, and Guitar Player magazine was big, and Downbeat and all that stuff. But that was it. And TV shows, I mean, I'm so old that it was even before videotapes. When I was learning, VHSs didn't come out in 1975. I mean, that's when they came out. I mean, I learned in the late '60s, early '70s. It was my formative years of learning.
Okay. Well, it seems like for anybody who's watching this interview, do not. I mean, the internet's great, but don't neglect like the power of just getting out there, meeting the musicians, watching musicians play. If you're in the LA area, I know that if you go down to Ventura Boulevard in Studio City, there's a place called Baked Potato.
Right.
There's great musicians that are playing there all the time, even if they're coming through for a tour. Like Buddy Guy comes through for a tour, and his musicians go there and they jam. So don't neglect that face-to-face element, because music is, you can hear it through a computer and through the internet, but it still isn't a replacement for hearing it live and being able to see what the guitarist is doing with his hands. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's so true. It is. And I mean, that's if you're a musician, you need an audience, and so really you need an audience that's astute in the kind of music that you play.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certain kind of music where it doesn't appeal on an emotional level. It's more visceral. They could somebody they dance, or they whatever it is they do at a rave or whatever. But it's not. It's there's music there, but it's not to to touch you emotionally in that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And some people,
it's more primal, just
and some people, and they're the minority, I think. But music doesn't do anything for them in an emotional way. You know what I mean? So when they hear music, it might be just the lyrics, which could be emotional.
Yeah.
But it might be that, or it just might be the beat.
Yeah.
But for me and for most musicians, obviously, it's a combination of all those things. It could be the lyrics, it could be the groove of the song. for me, so much it's the harmonic structure of what's going on harmony-wise. Of course, if the great playing, all of the originality of it, all those things. I mean, music should be able to make you feel great. It should be able to make you cry. And everything in between. If you love music.
Yeah.
So, and if you have that feeling about music and not about being famous, then you'll become a good musician. If you
Yeah.
no matter what it is you play, if that's the feeling that you get when you hear music, then you will get good.
Yeah.
But and then if you want to be famous, that maybe that's more important. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's that kind of success over excellence.
yeah.
And so and again, I'm not hey, it's great to be famous. I guess for a lot of people, there's nothing wrong with it, or to make a lot of money at what you do. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
To be successful on a level like that is a great thing.
Yeah.
But for some people, it's the only thing.
Yeah.
And that's not what art is about.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I think especially in LA, there's a lot of people who the fame is the primary focus, and every decision they make is filtered around what's gonna reach them towards that goal. And that doesn't necessarily mean I'm gonna become the best at my instrument, because I mean there are a lot of people who are famous that aren't the best at what they do. They might be famous because they're the best at being themselves, and that might have meant they had like more hustle than everybody else did. They had harder work ethic. So I'm not necessarily knocking that. I'm not being like a elitist like about the art form itself, but you just have to be clear. I guess you have to be clear about what your goal is. If you want to be famous, just be honest. Like that's what you want. If you want to be great, then be honest about that and do what you need to do to be great.
Right. I mean, there's music that moves me that technically, like might not be, difficult music to master, let's say. One of my favorite artists is Willie Nelson. I love Willie Nelson. Now, is he a great singer? No. He's a good guitar player, but he's not a great guitar player. Mm-hmm. But man, he plays with so much emotion. Everything he does, you can feel the emotion, in his playing and in his singing. And I like his guitar playing. And he knows tunes, he knows chord changes. I mean, he's a songwriter. He's written some great songs. I mean, he's a great talent, in that way. And so, now am I going to learn? Am I going to practice? Learn to steal Willie Nelson's licks on the guitar? No, but he moves me. There's and then on the other spectrum, I can listen to like awesome players, just awesome guitar players. And I don't even try to learn their stuff. It's like I don't play like that. It's like I'd have to start all over again to try to play what they play. Yeah. I'm just loving what they do. So I'm a fan. I don't listen to them as a guitar player saying, man, that's cool. I know I could do that. Or, I'm gonna steal that. I gotta strive in that. You know what I mean? Because I listen like that too. Yeah. But or that's a great idea. I didn't think of that. I love what he did there. But you understand what he did. Yeah. Or she. But like some guys I listen to, and it's just like, I just love. I'm not going to be able to play like that. So it's totally different from what I do. So I just listen as a fan.
Okay. So I'm gonna wrap it up with this last question. It's kind of a fun question I like to ask. What is your favorite record, and what would your life be like if it never existed?
Ooh, awesome question. I mean, I have a lot. Just like everybody would probably say, there's a ton of records that I love that were influential on me. But one comes to mind that for me did change me in what the kind of playing I wanted, the kind of player I wanted to be, and that's the album El Hombre by Pat Martino. Pat Martino's playing was a big influence on me, and when I heard, that was the first album I ever heard of him, because back then I'd go to the record store and you couldn't. Sometimes you could hear an album, but you really couldn't back in the record stores that were near my house. So I would just look at the cover. Oh, here's a guy I never heard of him, but he's got a jazz guitar on there, and I'm looking at I'm going to buy this album.
Yeah.
When I put that album on, it was like revolutionary because he was like a hard bop modern guitar player. He played more modern than the guys I was listening to, which were also great players. Don't get me wrong, but they were great players. But Pat Martino was just, he was the, in 1969, 1970, when these were recorded, that was the most modern I've ever heard. He was ultra modern for that time, and a great player, technique and just unbelievable lines and swing, and so that album, El Hombre, Pat Martino, it made me want to go in that direction. I changed the way I played. I played more before that, and I was young, but I listened to more like swing guitar players, like George Barnes, who's a great player, but more of a swing player. Django Reinhardt, I listened to Django, who was like a legend. Django was a genius, great player. But when I heard Pat Martino play, it was like, no, that's the way I want to play. He sounds like a trumpet player.
Mm-hmm.
He sounds like a horn player. And it wasn't about the guitar as much as that he was playing great jazz. It was the lines that he played, everything. So that album was like a big life changer. And if I didn't hear that album, I don't know, because it was my formative years when I heard that album. So right away, I transcribed some of his licks, and I started trying to play like that. You know what I mean? And so for the next year of practice, I started to learn a little bit about what he was doing, and how his approach to things, And if I never heard that album, I don't know how I would play, If I would have,
Who would have known? Because it had such a big influence. Who would know? If it was... All right. Well, that about wraps it up, Steve. Thanks so much for coming on. This is...
Hey, thanks for having me, Kyle. Excellent. It was great to see you.
Great to see you again, too, man.
All right, that's it for this week's episode of Seeds of Music. Hope you guys learned a lot from that interview, just as much as I did from giving that interview, even though I'd had him as an instructor before. There's always something to learn, no matter if you think you know. You find out that you don't really know, and it's always great to have someone with great experience to be able to kind of guide you and give you some pointers so you can avoid a lot of the common mistakes that musicians or guitarists usually make. So, guys, just a quick reminder. I know it's a quick reminder that I always do, but if you're not signed up on the Seeds of Music email newsletter yet, please go ahead and punch in your name and email and get in on that so I can communicate directly with you and make sure that you don't miss any of these interviews that come out. And if you're watching this from YouTube, maybe you searched for, a guitar tip advice or whatever, and you just came across this video, just head over to seedsofmusic.net and sign up for the newsletter there, because that's where I have the form set up for you. Also, if you feel like you learned a lot from this video, got a lot of great tips for not only being a guitarist or maybe playing jazz guitar or just being a professional musician and having a successful career. If you feel like this has helped you take another step towards that dream of yours, go ahead and make sure to like this video on Facebook and also share it on Facebook or Twitter or whatever platform you are using so that friends can check it out, or if you have other buddies that play guitar or musicians as well, they can benefit from that. Last thing is comment on the video. I want to know what was what was the one thing he said that blew your mind? Because I know there's a lot of great information in there, but for you personally, there's got to be one thing that he said that probably stood out above the rest, and I want to know what that is. And also, how are you going to apply that to what you are doing now? How are you going to practice differently? How are you going to, what action are you going to take based off of this interview? And who would you like to see interviewed? Is there someone a musician or a band or an entrepreneur or some other creative type that you know has a great story and has a lot to say, and you'd like to see them interviewed on this show? Just get in touch with me. There's a contact form on the front page, or you can reach me at kyle.seedsmusic@gmail.com. And give me about day, or most of the time, like max of 2 days for me to respond back, but I do make sure that I respond back to every single email. So I hope to see you guys in the comment section, and until next time.